Poor Peter. Won't anyone think of Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times? A week later, and Jesus still hasn't said anything to Simon Peter. He has been neglected by his Lord, whom he neglected that awful night, while Jesus plays hide and seek, feel my wounds with Thomas, the twin. What must be going through his mind? What must be racing through his heart? Has he gotten a wink of sleep this entire week? Jesus, who was crucified, died, and was buried, rose again and has fastidiously avoided talking directly to Peter, the leader of the apostles, their spokesman. Poor Peter. Is peace with him? Well, yes, it is. When you run away from a guy to whom you pledged undying love at the first sign of real trouble, what's a couple of clubs and chains to a fellow who just raised Lazarus from the dead? When you run away from him and then he's killed, and then he comes back from the dead, of course you're afraid. You're afraid of everything. And it was morning, and it was evening, the first day of the resurrection. And God saw that it was good to visit them. 1 full day of fear was long enough. So he stopped by, saying, "Peace be with you." And they were glad. Wouldn't you be glad? He's not mad at you. You abandoned him, left him for dead, even denied that you knew him, and ran away. And the first words he says to you are, "Peace be with you." And they were glad. And then he said, "If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them." Well, of course. This makes perfect sense. It is finished. There is no reason to exact vengeance against sinners who are afraid. The death of Jesus is a forgiving death, finishing the work of forgiveness once for all time, for everyone who lives in the evening of the first day of the resurrection, like the disciples do, like you do, like I do. You deserved the worst kind of vengeance, but he says, "Peace be with you," and you are glad. But Thomas was not there, so he did not hear the good word of peace. Once again, there are some obvious things going on here. If you are in fear as a follower of Jesus, and you see the Son of God, and his first words are, "Peace be with you," then you probably have no problem believing that he is alive. If you do not see him and hear him say, "Peace be with you," then you probably have a big problem believing he is alive. Thomas says, "Unless I see in his hands the marks of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." You do the same thing when you hold the bread in your hands, by the way, and you take a drink of the cup. It is the same thing by faith what Thomas demands by sight, and Jesus provides. Isn't it an odd thing to demand? But isn't it an odd thing to notice? He said, "Peace be with you" first, right? Then before anything else, he showed them his hands and his side. My grandmother remarried after her first husband divorced her. My new opa was a widower, and he had been very lonely, which made him kind of strange. The first time I visited him, I spied some war medals on a shelf behind a picture of his first wife. One of them was the wound badge, which was ominous to me because it reminded me that my mom's parents fought for the Nazis. So I was pondering this. I asked him about his wound. He said, "See, it was a $1 million wound." And he smiled, and he turned around, and he started unbuckling his belt. And I said, no, I don't need to see it, but it was too late. I saw it, and now I cannot unsee it. He was proud of his wound. Proud. He had physical, living proof that he had fought honorably as a young man in a horrible conflagration against his home. Every time he sat down, he was reminded of his service. Physical, living proof. Jesus is proud of his wounds. John reports to us that when he saw the Son of God in his glory, he saw a lamb standing, which had been slain. The lamb had been slain and is now standing. Jesus said, peace be with you. And he showed them his hands and his side, which took some doing. And you now see his hands and his side when you eat the bread and when you drink the wine. The marks in his hand and in his side are proof, physical, living proof that he fought honorably against the horrible invasion of sin, against his home, his garden, his land, his creation. And it was morning and it was evening, the first day of the resurrection. Physical, living proof. Can you do what Thomas did? Can you do by faith what Thomas did by sight? Can you take the bread and put your finger on it and see his hands? Can you take the cup and place your hand into his side? Can you do that? Do you believe? The twin of Jesus says, my Lord and my God. Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and believe. Blessed are those who believe, not seeing. This is a big deal, not seeing. The whole Gospel of John hinges upon it. We walk in darkness all the way, following the light, a light that shines from God, but it is a light that shines within us. So we are still in the dark, but guided by a light. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon and have touched with our hands. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. In the darkness we are hidden away for fear. Jesus shines in our hearts, showing us his hands and his side, whether we want to see it or not, because he is proud of his wounds. His wounds finished the work of salvation, cleansing us from all our sins. So we take a look at life, at water, at bread, at wine, and we do not see. And not seeing, we believe. These things are written so that you have enough to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Poor Peter believes, but he's in the dark about what Jesus thinks of him. Does he believe that Jesus has already made peace with him? Won't Jesus just take him aside and talk to him? Is Jesus going to withhold forgiveness from him? It is not silly to be afraid on the evening of the first day of the resurrection. Some great power has been unleashed from the tomb, and you place your very hands into that power.